Coach, has Pete Carroll finally figured out the recipe for unleashing Russell Wilson? Let him cook.
Well, again, we're 2 weeks in. The two teams that they played are the Atlanta Falcons, who obviously have a little trouble playing defense, and the New England Patriots, who gave up 5 passing touchdowns, and I think they had only given up 4 the year before. So there's been significant they've taken some significant steps back with all the opt-outs defensively in New England. The idea of classifying this as being the formula that's going to carry them through the course of the season, I think, is the wrong approach. If you just go into it and think, look, last year they ran the ball, and they ran the ball consistently, and that helped Russell Wilson do a ton of great things.
2 years.
And now, if you just want to throw it all over the place, you know, it'll work, you know, against some teams, and then you're going to get smacked by other teams. I don't think it's a function of letting him cook. I think it's a function of doing whatever you need to do to push the things forward offensively, and not go to extremes one way or the other.
No, we want extremes, Nick? Coach. In this instance, we want extremes. We want now listen, Wiles made the point that Pete Carroll might have let him cook one play too long, that it was on a nice simmer the whole game, and then he turned the heat on high on that 3rd and 1 bomb when they could have just iced the game. They almost set the kitchen on fire. I understand that. That was a little too much cooking. But in general, we are cooking the right amount here, Brandon. When you picked the Seahawks to go to the Super Bowl, the only reason I disagreed with you was I was worried that Russ was not going to be allowed to cook enough. And he is cooking up a storm right now. He's the second best player in the whole league. And I will even say, you could make the argument he's the best. You could make it. I'll disagree with you, but it's a legitimate argument. Those receivers, DK Metcalf looks like the combine freak he was coming out of Ole Miss, and then some. You talked about the unbelievable deep ball combination he's had with Tyler Lockett over the last few years. They don't have a great running game, and they haven't had, per carry, a great running game since Marshawn Lynch left. Let Russ cook. This is the formula. And if you're playing the Seahawks, Brandon, you're praying they take the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands. So I give Pete Carroll credit. I think he finally was bullied and peer pressured by the blogs and Twitter, and he's finally letting Russ cook, and it's led to a near perfect start to the season.
Yeah, Jenna, this is a good question. I'm glad you asked this question because it's it starts a great discussion and conversation. But the more we have it, the more I understand Coach Carroll. We have to think about this. Go back to 2014, 2015, back-to-back Super Bowls. They won one. What was the recipe? The recipe was play really good defense, run the ball, and let Russ make those big plays like we're seeing right here in those defining moments. So when you think about that, right, like you're like, this is the formula, this is our recipe to get back to that. And I think that's what Coach Carroll has been trying to replicate. Now, you also got to think about the maturation of Russell Wilson. When you think about Russell Wilson, you think about how dynamic he is as a playmaker and scrambling and with his legs and making these amazing throws. But there's also a maturation for him as a quarterback, and we don't really talk about that. I think the last 2 years is when he's been ready to cook. And I know this conversation's been around for a couple of years, but when you think about how this team is set up from an offensive standpoint, they never had that play caller that they were really comfortable with. This is Coach Schottenheimer's 3rd year in this system. So you think about them being comfortable and finally saying, okay, I'm comfortable with my play caller. You understand the identity of the team. You understand Russell Wilson. You understand what we're trying to do here. Now, I think that's why you're seeing Coach Carroll really let go of the leash just a little bit, because I do believe he has a formula, and I don't think he's wrong because it worked for them in the past. It's really hard to get to the Super Bowl. It's damn near impossible. So when you've done it 2 times, like, why wouldn't you do the same thing? But when you have Russell Wilson, I think this is where Coach is really letting go a little bit. You have to be able to do what you have to do week in and week out. Sometimes it's relying on the run game. Sometimes it's passing. And he's like a basketball player. If he's hot, let him go. Don't worry about running the ball. Let Russ go win the game for you because he can.
Earlier in this year, Russ talked about never receiving an MVP vote, but I don't know whose MVP he wants. Does he want Lamar's? I don't think so. Does he want Mahomes? Does he want Brady's? So this narrative that he needs the MVP has kind of been floating around, which is why I think Metcalf put that out. And then, of course, the social media maven, DeAndre Hopkins, was quick to respond. Boom. He's like, by the way, I'm starting my Kyler for MVP campaign. So, Brandon, as a wide receiver, I'm looking at Julian Edelman. We know he's got a full media unit. Nick, yeah. I'm looking at Tyreek Hill. I checked his Twitter today. I'm like, man, maybe there's some real problems in Kansas City. I haven't seen any tweets from Sammy Watkins, nothing from Cheetah about Mahomes.
This could be a thing.
I'd be very nervous. It's definitely a thing, yeah, Brandon. Thank you. We're making it.
Wilds,
we're making it
Wilds, I give you credit for having the journalistic integrity to not even include no tweets from Godwin about Brady. Like, of course there isn't. I think he's got a 78 passer rating. So good job by you on only including the elite players in the league still. So I appreciate that. Coach, can we revisit this issue here? Because you and I have been having this argument for years. And I understand how Seattle made those Super Bowls, to Brandon's point. But that was a different team. That was Russell Wilson in year 2 and year 3, not in his prime. That was a team with Marshawn Lynch, and that was a team with multiple Hall of Fame caliber players on that defense. Now you're a team that is rebuilding the defense. You have Bobby Wagner, obviously, who's an unbelievable player, and you just added Jamal Adams. You haven't been able to replace Marshawn Lynch for a half decade, and Russell Wilson is the best he's ever been with the deepest receiving core he's ever had. Like, New England had one way to win games when they had Gronk and Hernandez, one way to win games when they had a bunch of just slot receivers and good running backs, like, and now a different way to win games with Cam. Like, shouldn't they evolve, and isn't this them evolving into our quarterback's the best he's been, the strengths of our team are different, so let's lean into them.
Well, one of the things that you do if you have a defense that's young and evolving is there is an element of trying to protect them, and then that means being able to control the ball, not putting them into shootouts. And if you can run the ball consistently, the other thing that does, and this has been a factor in Seattle, is it protects your quarterback. The more that you can consistently make the defense honor the fact that you'll run the ball and not just be pass first, there's an element of those guys have to honor it as pass rushers, and it slows it down and it helps Russell Wilson. And that was a formula that they had last year and was very effective. We got to look at where New England's defense ends up and where Atlanta's defense ends up at the end of the year to know whether or not this is an aberration. But when you look at it statistically, it looks like Atlanta's going to struggle. And when you look at what happened in the passing game, it looks like New England's going to struggle with that too. So I don't think that there's one formula. And just quickly share a story. When I had Brett Favre, someone at the very high end of the organization didn't think I was letting him cook enough. And we're playing Cincinnati with the worst run defense in the league. So we let him cook, and he threw a pick for an interception for a touchdown, and we barely run the game. And then I got a call on Monday and said, well, why didn't you run the ball more? So these slogans are great, but they don't fit for every situation.
Yeah, I mean, man, this Seattle team, they're really strong. I mean, for all these reasons that we're all talking about, they're all valid, but they can really do everything. Now they had a big blow to that defense with Bruce Irvin going down with an ACL, so we'll see how they bounce back from that. They struggled to get to the pass rusher, but this team can play good defense. I don't know if they can be a great defense, but they can be good. And then on the offensive side, with Russell Wilson, we're having this debate of letting him cook. but they can throw it 40 times a game if they want, and they also can run. And Nick, I think you're just way too disrespectful to Chris Carson. Like, Chris Carson is a dog. This guy can tote it 30 times if they wanted to hand it off that many times to him. So this offense, this team is built for a championship run. And the last thing I would say about Russell Wilson is this, because, it's a good discussion because he should be talked about as an MVP. He should be talked about as the best player in the National Football League. Because just think about if he had Andy Reid as his play caller, what would he be doing? Yeah. But what makes this kid special is this.
He'd have been cooking.
Let me tell you what makes this kid special. What makes this kid special is that some people, they're just so cerebral and they just need to know where everyone's at. Russ is a student. He understands where everyone's at, but then he has this innate ability to see the whole field organically and naturally. Yep. He knows where everyone's at. That's why he's able to make those plays when he breaks the pocket, because his eyes are everywhere, and he does it effortlessly. So Russell Wilson is definitely on his way to get his first MVP.
Well, and Liz, I'll just be very quick here. I'm going to use the Kevin Wildes corollary. What is your opponent hoping you do? And Kevin Wildes was watching that Sunday night football game, rooting for his beloved Patriots, praying Seattle handed the ball off. Hand it off. Nothing against Chris Carson. Hand it off. Keep handing it off. What he didn't want was Russell Wilson back there cooking, because he was cooking Stephon Gilmore. He was cooking that whole Patriots secondary, who I actually think is still really good, Coach. They had 3 picks against Fitzpatrick the week before. I just think Russell Wilson cut him up, Jenna. Diced him up like in a nice stew.
Well, I'm suddenly starving. Coach, thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.